is Microbiology Roundtable 2020, and as much as I'm excited about presenting this video, I hope it is finding our viewers happy, healthy, and completely untouched by this pandemic. The year of 2020 has changed the perceptions and revealed the facts while it has masked the people, literally. As it is said very wisely, we are battling the same storm in the different boat, and I have an army, the warrior, the fighters with us, five of them. We are all fighting the same storm in different boats. We are united by this pandemic, but divided by state borders, nonetheless, trying our best daily. So, I'm Dr. Chavi Gandhi, clinical microbiologist and infection control officer by day, and passionate reader and blogger by night. And before I introduce you to the brilliant and supportive people I'm backed by, I would like to elaborate what clinical microbiology basically is. So, we all know that in a crime, there is an accused and there's a victim. Here, victim is taken care by physicians, accused is taken care of by scientists, and clinical microbiologists are the ones who are basically catering to both at the same time. And this is clinical microbiology and infection control for you. So with that, I would like to introduce Dr. Isra Halim from Patna, Dr. Yasha Mukim from New Delhi, Dr. Geetu Jo from Pune, Dr. Gaipa Gitika Reddy from Telangana, and Dr. Mamita Dev from Mangalore. So we are all here. We are all in this video together. We are all fighting this pandemic as healthcare workers, as infection control officers, and as well as diagnosticians. And I was asked by many people that who is this video for basically? So if you have been affected by this pandemic in any way, if you are searching for answers, if you think you have too little information or too much information that is overwhelming, overbearing, and you are completely bewildered, we are here trying to clear the mess. We are here to clear your mind and to fit your mind with all the right answers that we could gather from all the authentic sources and, of course, from our experience. With that, I would like to represent these five warriors, fighters, and they will tell you about your experiences. And Dr. Isra, I would start with you. We are clearing up the common questions that are rising in people's minds. And first question is that now this is a change of season. It's been months that we have been into the pandemic. We have seen several seasons in this. Because of change of season, some people have asthma, some have they are allergic to pollens, and then they develop cough and flu-like symptoms. So, what do you think? Is the cough responsible for the pandemic, or is the pandemic causing the cough, or is the asthma causing the cough? What is it?
Okay, there couldn't be a better time to answer this question because most of India is now dealing with a chill, and most patients that we get now dust off their cough as being, seasonal, season change ho gaya, and they have weird explanations for them. This is also the time for the twindemic that we were anticipating because this is the viral flu season. All the influenzas, bird flus, swine flus were usually would peak during this time. So people would just say it's a viral flu, COVID nahi hai. But and by this time 10, 11 months into the pandemic, people do know that COVID hoga to dry cough hoga, which is a very persistent hoarse cough, and they just say ki nahi nahi, I am getting phlegm, which is COVID nahi ho sakta. But that is not true at all, because a lot of patients, about 10 to 15%, do present with atypical symptoms also, like an cough with expectoration. And in the pandemic, when an exceptionally large number of people are getting affected, any cough, any fever, any sore throat is COVID unless proved otherwise. So you can't just dismiss a cough as not being COVID because season change ho gaya.
So in that case, testing is mandatory unless,
Absolutely.
yeah. So it's COVID unless proven otherwise.
Yes.
Yeah. Geetu, I would like to ask you, we know that we have symptoms of cough, sore throat, and all these upper and lower respiratory symptoms, breathlessness, fever. What else can be there which is not related to the respiratory system that COVID affects directly?
In fact, we have come across so many cases where per se they may not have any the routine manifestations as you mentioned. So people know that COVID is a kind of flu. It affects the lungs, so we are bound to have cough, cold, fever. But there are several other manifestations which may be the presenting feature as well. So all this is because of I would like to say some kind of receptor which the virus goes and binds to. So its presence over the lungs, apart from the lungs, it is also present, say, over your nose. I would like to put it in simple terms. It is present in your intestine, it is present in your kidneys, it may be present in your gallbladder, it may be present uh, everywhere else. And because of that, because of the attack of the virus on these receptors, you may manifest several other features, like patients may present with, very loss of sensation of smell, a loss of sensation of taste, or they may present with diarrhea because it goes and affects the intestine. They may present with some symptoms like, say, it may be an abdominal pain, or suddenly a kidney injury. They were properly normal otherwise, and suddenly they present with, their renal function test getting altered, or he may be not a known diabetic previously, or maybe he would have tested previously, he was not to be known as a diabetic, and suddenly you find raised blood sugar levels. So it presents with a hyperglycemia that we call in our medical language. And so these are the rare symptoms that we may come across in patients, apart from the routinely mentioned symptoms that you already stated.
Okay. So, Yasha, I would like to ask you that just tell us the chronology of symptoms in case of COVID. Like first week, what can we anticipate? Second week, what is the probability of the symptoms? And can you please explain us that?
I would love to answer this question, because every patient has a very different sequelae altogether. And usually, the asymptomatics or the milder ones, like we have categorized COVID patients into asymptomatic, mild, moderate, and severe cases. So, usually, the asymptomatic and all the mild cases, they usually have a very easy path to recovery, and they recover within, 10 to 14 days, and they are back to their normal selves. But the tricky part is when the patients get into the moderate category, and there is a lot of lung infiltration and more soft changes that occurs in such patients because of obviously a lot of cytokine release that happens. So here also patient by the first week, if by 7 days, if the patients still show increased cough, or high grade fever which is persistent and going up to 102 degree Fahrenheit or 3, and not resoluting at all. So that is the time when appropriate medications, use of important drugs has to be taken in that particular phase. So if a patient is into the moderate case, by the second week the patient also starts to show, or the soft changes goes back, and the resolution starts to happen. And by the third week, or the third week of illness, the fibrosis in some patients are there. Every patient with COVID will have some patch in their lung, okay, be it a mild case, moderate case, or severe case. So the patches resolute by the second week. But if the patches also remain by the third week and the severity goes high, that is the week where maximum fibrosis occurs in such patients. And then they, go to the severe part of the disease. And in some patients where the comorbidities are more, there is a uncontrolled diabetic thing that they have. So those cases are into the dicey zone that we call, can come back, cannot come back. So that is the third week onwards. We see that kind of a picture in COVID patients. So it's like first week you have mild symptoms or moderate symptoms. Second week you have a week of maximum cytokine release, acute changes that can occur in moderate to severe cases, which has mostly soft changes in their HRCT chest, if you see. And the third phase, or the third week, is usually week of recovery or week of fibrosis that is seen in patients.
Okay, so speaking of unusual presentations, Yasha, we know that you have a special liking for pediatric infectious diseases. So I would like to start this question from you, that what is the usual presentation in children, and is it a myth that they are super spreaders as what we call them, or they are largely asymptomatic? Should we anticipate that?
So children are by far and large into the category of asymptomatic, and but of course we cannot apply this to all the patients that present to us. So there are symptoms that are very typical in pediatric age group. Specifically, they would just have one spike of fever, and mild headache, or they might just have a general malaise. In infants, they will, would not there will be an improper feeding habit that will be seen in them. So of course, loss of appetite, inadequate feeding, there'll be diarrhea, sometimes dry cough, that is typically seen in pediatric age group. But then they resolute very easily, and within a week they usually, they're you see recovery in children, specifically if they are mild cases. So yes, the term super spreaders was applied to them, but now this myth has to be taken care of. They are no more super spreaders. In fact, they are almost like, secondary cases if we see. So children are usually cases because they have come in contact with a confirmed COVID case, like their household contacts, their parents, or somebody in the house who has been positive. And definitely they are not super spreaders, or they are not the primary cases most of the times. And so yeah, this is one of the reason why they should now go back to schools, and reopening of schools and nurseries are, speculated at this point of time, just because of this scenario. And of course, with proper precautions and proper wearing mask and hand hygiene, children can now go back to schools, and reopening of schools and nurseries can happen now.
I do believe they also have a very robust system as compared to the adults,
Yeah,
especially the
true.
elderly. So more
Yes.
T cells, more B cells, better,
Yeah.
more natural killer cells. So I think they're
Yes. So they don't
actually
have
better.
the typical neutralizing effect that is
Exactly.
seen. Yeah. So that's why the disease as such is not very, very severe in them.
Now, despite being a brilliant diagnostician, Geeta, you're also a super mom. Can you answer me this question, that how important it is to isolate the kids when they are asymptomatic in case of the adults getting infected, since kids can be the source? Or, adults are of this attitude that testing is very inconvenient for the kids. So they don't go for the testing if adults are affected and families quarantined. Do you agree with this concept?
No, actually, the pediatric age group. That is the reason less. So
Uh,
more in the pediatric age
your voice is
is isolation has to be done in affected. It is
Geeta, can you please repeat? Your voice is breaking a bit.
a 2 or 3 year old COVID. You cannot isolate them with your family. Or a father can stay with the kid,
Mhm.
be in isolation, have and the attender who is taking care of the child has to wear the mask and gloves, and all other sanitization works has to be done. And one more thing I wanted to mention here is that being asymptomatic here, the kids most symptoms rather than with the respiratory. Family adult is being affected the source, you have to check your kids whether part is being missing. And incidence of the pediatric cases is not say that
Geeta, your
no, as
voice.
of now we have no evidence on.
Mhm. Geeta, your voice is breaking a bit. So please, if you can check your connection. Anyone else want to answer this? Geetu, Yasha, anyone else wants to add
I
something?
can you just repeat the question once more?
Yeah. So the question is that when there's a affected adult in the family, so what family is doing is that they think that the testing will be inconvenient on the kids, so they don't get their kids tested. So do you agree with this kind of concept? Do you think that?
No, not really.
Yeah.
Just cannot go with the fact that no, if I am positive, my kid can be positive or cannot be, and I don't want to get the child tested. Of course, the child has to be tested for all the obvious reasons, because you don't know the path to the disease. You don't know what the sequelae of the disease would be it a child or anyone. So
Yeah, I
definitely testing
agree.
is important in every case, be it a child
Exactly.
or
The
be it an adult.
diagnosis
Yeah.
should be the bottom line of the pandemic.
Yes.
So,
And
irrespective of the age group, they should be treated.
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, diagnosed.
So, Momita, I would like to ask you this. Speaking of diagnosis, if RT-PCR is negative, are we out of the woods? Is it okay to be relaxed, especially when
This
the
is a
person is
question.
symptomatic?
Don't you think this is a question we deal with every day? Every day we get these cases. Patient is showing symptoms, and RT-PCR is negative. How is this possible? Or can we just release the patient or go ahead with the surgery or anything? So this is something what we are trying to make people understand, make common people also understand that RT-PCR is not 100% sensitive.
Right.
The sensitivity of RT-PCR goes somewhere between 72 to 95%. So true false negatives are coming around 2 to, I don't know, 29%. So 2 to 29% cases they might have the disease, but RT-PCR might show negative. And there are lots of reasons behind this. We can take into consideration the sample collection might not be proper. The quality of the sample plays a vital role in any microbiological diagnosis, and especially in molecular diagnosis. And the timing of the sample uh, collecting sample, the timing of the collecting sample, or patient in the timeline of the disease course where patient stands. If sample is collected too early or sample is collected very late in the course of the disease, there might be a chance that we are not getting a positive RT-PCR in a patient who is eventually a COVID patient. Then the type of sample what we are testing, most common or in this in India or worldwide actually, we are taking nasal swab and throat swab, whereas the sensitivity of them actually comes individually around 25 to 32%, and if we combine it, it goes till 40 to 60 max. Whereas if we can collect a bronchoalveolar lavage, the sensitivity goes higher as high as 95%. But it is not practical to collect a bronchoalveolar lavage in at mass. For that reason, maybe we are not considering BA, that is bronchoalveolar lavage, and thus we are compromising with the sensitivity of RT-PCR also. So, and also, which genes are we are targeting in RT-PCR? If we are targeting single gene, there is a the accuracy of RT-PCR goes down a lot. Whereas if we are targeting multiple gene, we can actually increase the sensitivity of RT-PCR. So if we keep in mind these all points, then we cannot say that negative RT-PCR gives you a clear or clean sheet that you can go or be open in the society. Okay. If for us microbiologists, what we are dealing, say if I give you an example, what we have faced like few days back only, one general practitioner, he came with a history of exposure to a COVID known COVID positive patient, and he developed some symptoms like cough, and he had a bout of fever also. After 2 days he was feeling better, but still he has gone for RT-PCR, and he got a negative RT-PCR report, and he was keen to start his practice again. So he was asking for our opinion, should he start or not? My opinion was no, because as he has a history, he has a clinical feature, he is one of the high risk group. We cannot take into consideration that he should go into the that just because he has got a negative RT-PCR, we cannot say that he has not got the disease. So we have suggested him to go for self isolation and take treatment if required. Whereas in another case scenario, if a known COPD patient comes to you with a little bit exaggeration of the symptoms, and she is or he is getting a RT-PCR negative, in that case you should consider that might be the symptoms because of the existing disease. So actually, what I'm trying to say, depending on only one report, you cannot say if patient is having the disease or not having the disease. You have to consider patient's symptoms, patient's risk, whether he can be a positive, whether he has been exposed to a known positive or not, and the uh, the overall history of the patient. You have to consider all these
Of
things, and
course.
also other investigations. RT-PCR might be negative, but chest X-ray or CT scan can show the infiltrations. In that case, you have to treat the patient as a positive. And when ongoing pandemic, as Ishra ma'am said that any cough and cold or common cold is COVID until proof otherwise. That should be the golden line.
So Yasha, you
I
just
would just like to add one thing to this. So, when we say that a negative RT-PCR report is, I'm free of COVID or probably I don't have. So again, viral clearance is a very, very important thing in this case. It just depends on person to person how the viral clearance takes place. Some people just get it cleared in like few days, and in few individuals virus does stay for a very long time. So viral clearance is a very important thing, and of course in such cases other investigations like HRCT chest or any other radiological investigation is the key. So you have to correlate it with other investigations if RT-PCR is negative.
Also, when the PCR comes negative very soon in the disease, I do believe that every
Yeah.
person, irrespective of the symptoms, should be quarantined for at least 14 days. So, like Momita gave the first case example, nobody can just walk out in the open because their second or third day PCR comes negative.
Yeah.
You should, everybody as a rule should follow the 10 to 14-day quarantine.
so
Very true. And
basically the test
As
report
Dr.
is
Yasha said, sorry, as
no.
Dr. Yasha said, that there was a case reported that patient was RT-PCR positive for 2 months after
Yeah,
treatment also. Yeah.
yeah,
So
Yes.
that's
viral clearance is a
long
very
persistence.
individual
Yeah,
thing. You cannot
Yes. Yes.
apply a golden rule for everyone.
Yes. Yes.
exactly.
Definitely.
So I would like to ask you, Yasha, how to time the tests. There are so many battery of tests. There is antigen test, there is RT-PCR, there is antibody. How to time, because everyone is confused. And what happened in national news, it flashed that some people were antigen test negative, but later on RT-PCR positive. So I think only we understand the technicalities of it. So can you please
Yes.
explain what is the reason?
So yes, of course, timing of tests are very, very important. But the fact that antigen test, it cannot be ever compared to a molecular test like RT-PCR. So that is a very important factor. Even if people are who are negative on antigen testing and they are getting under the fact that okay, I tested positive with RT-PCR, they should know that antigen testing has a very low sensitivity when compared to RT-PCR as such. So that is one case scenario that definitely antigen tests cannot be compared to a molecular test that is an RT-PCR. The second thing is timing really holds a very crucial and important role, like we just discussed, that it is usually preferred to get yourself tested within 3 to 5 days of your symptom. And if you test yourself just when you had one spike of fever or just a headache, and you think that you can just get tested and you're negative and so you're COVID free, no, that's not the thing. You should keep on testing, or you should time your test properly. At least 3 to 5 days you should give for your symptoms to incubate, or your that's an incubation time. The virus replicates, and then you'll have a better sensitivity if you get tested on RT-PCR. So definitely One thing is, do not compare antigen testing to RT-PCR. And second is, get yourself tested in the right time. At least give 3 to 5 days
And
post
also,
your
people
symptoms.
should be probably the ones, especially because you mentioned the media, people in the media or otherwise should kind of understand the difference between a screening and a confirmatory test. So,
Yeah.
an antigen might have a different limit of detection, like it detects
Mm.
probably a smaller number of viruses
Mm.
versus a PCR, which, like Yasha said, is very sensitive and can detect a lot less
Yeah.
number of viruses.
Yes.
This goes on to tell that half knowledge can be so dangerous.
Exactly. Yeah. There's an infodemic along with the pandemic right now.
Yes.
So, Geeta, after speaking of half knowledge, uh, people just started stocking antibiotics. There were certain antibiotics, I don't want to name them, but people really stocked them, even huge names, big politicians. Is it becoming a norm instead of an irresponsible act? So, how can we go about it reasonably?
Ma'am, it is not becoming a norm. It is a norm actually. It is been a routine culture, especially in Indian scenario. Antibiotics are like you will get in the pharmacy right away. You don't need a prescription. So azithromycin, name it, they'll give any antibiotic. And even the thing is. Like when COVID had started in the beginning, Favipiravir is available. So people used to call me, hey, how to take this? So I was like, from where did you get? It's like available on stock in the pharmacy. So it is like, first of all, our health sector has to tighten up on this. Yeah, of course, people awareness is needed, but anyways, how much ever we say or how much ever we talk about antibiotics, it becomes a favorite part of a microbiologist to speak on antibiotics rather than creating an awareness. So the Indian government, especially the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, has to take an initiative. Like if you see, just as an example, I'm saying I'm near to Andhra Pradesh, in the Telangana, but here the pharmacy will get everything available. But in Andhra Pradesh, it has been made very a strict rule that a doctor, a clinician, has to sign and make a stamp of his along with his registration number, then only you will get the antibiotics. So it is what the initiative they have taken. I want all the places to do this kind of thing so that people know the importance of antibiotics. If not, then we have left with no drug, no cholesterol also in the near future. So it will become a very difficult thing. It is a irresponsible act, which as a people, common people, they don't have an awareness what is antibiotic. It's just like a normal toffee which they can have. It's the thing that is going on, and I don't support this.
And
So
it's
basic,
probably not only the layman, it's probably even the medical fraternity with
Yeah,
every,
Yeah.
probably a lot of big hospitals have
yeah.
meropenem and have doxycycline and everything available is given to the patient. Piptazo, a lot of drugs that are not needed, they're needed in bacterial pneumonias. But the fear of COVID and the easy availability, like Geeta said, is probably antibiotics stewardship has gone for a toss during 2020.
I think we are putting a lot of pressure on
Yeah,
our
ma'am,
researchers
I have
also.
something to discuss also, like
Yeah.
doxycycline. I just wanted to put a word. What is the role of doxycycline in COVID-19? I just wanted to just think what Isra ma'am is saying, that also misuse the antibiotics. This is the on this, then they say that we want the safety of the patient, but no, there is no safety in using antibiotics. So please, everyone has to take their own oath to control the misuse of the antibiotics, even clinicians, even the common people.
After all, it is a viral disease.
And we are putting a lot of pressure on our researchers also to come up with new antibiotics, which is very unfair.
Exactly. And sadly, the antiviral part of the thing has not been explored as well as the antibacterial thing is being explored for COVID.
Even
Easier to find.
anti-parasitic in some cases.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Geetu, I think it was the right time to unmute and to reveal yourself on camera, please, if you can hear us.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't know I was on mute.
Yeah. So, Geetu, we want to know There is a lot of confusion regarding isolation now. Some say 10 days, some say 14 days. And
Mhm,
the worst part is nobody is
mhm,
using science to make these kind of guidelines.
mhm,
I'm sorry to say, but the intention doesn't seem like that.
mhm.
So, what do you think
Right.
that, do you think you should wait for negative test? How is it important, the isolation period?
According to me, waiting for a negative test, or let us not mention negative, waiting for the test report is really a very bad idea. You know, you have been in contact with a positive case, or say you have the common symptoms, which, you know, as of now define a flu like illness, and you have got tested because you're suspecting COVID. So it is not like till I get the report, I will continue, you know, roaming around wild or do whatever I want, or get myself exposed to other people. That is really a very, very bad idea. Rather than that, when you have a suspicion, that is the main reason that you have got tested, it is always best to isolate yourself. If you're lucky enough and you do not have very bad symptoms, then home isolation will do. Keep yourself attached to a nearby hospital or a doctor until and unless you know, develop very bad symptoms or something, or if it is manageable, you're controlling your fever by taking fever reducing medications and all that, then stay at home. Once you get the result, okay, now let us talk about that. You were in contact with a positive patient, or your symptoms like clearly define COVID, and still your a PCR report says negative. As my friends have already discussed, that it is not necessary that your PCR report is negative, so you are, you can be labeled as COVID negative. It is not that way. If you still have the symptoms which are manageable at home, go for a home isolation. Stay at home for 14 days. Isolate yourself at your home. Keep yourself away from the elderly at home, particularly. If you can stick to a particular washroom, or say a particular room where you can be served food, rather than, you know, mingling with your family members also and causing them the disease. So it is, I would advise, stick to your home for 14 days if your symptoms can be controlled, and post your symptoms, say like, you know, 3 days you're free from your symptoms, or you're not on any fever reducing medications, or not having any kinds of manifestations of cough or cold. Post 3 days of that reduction of symptoms or no symptoms, then you can consider yourself fit to, you know, uh, get yourself out of the isolation, and then resume back to your daily activities.
So, Yasha, I would like to know your views about isolation. What do you want to say? What
So,
should we do?
Dr. Geetu had rightly mentioned, one of the criteria could be 3 days going asymptomatic consecutively. But, the 14-day isolation is definitely the norm right now. But the part of you getting tested again, that, to resume your activities or resume your daily work, you have to get an RT-PCR negative report. No, that's not the scene. That's not the scenario. In fact, repeat testing is not even required anymore. And since we have already discussed that patients or who have been COVID positive can be positive because, again, the viral clearance is a very important thing. So patients do remain positive till 2 months, 3 months, but that does not signify that they are infectious at all. So usually that infectious part is seventh, eighth day. Till the seventh, eighth day of their illness, they are infectious. They can give it to the people around them, but post that they are usually non-infectious. So yes, repeat testing is not required until unless that people do have the stigma of if you are joining back work you need a negative report, but that does not hold true. you know
Exactly. Only when there are policies involved, like somebody needs to travel somewhere or
yeah.
has to join work and needs a report, only then I think in such a, we're all burdened with a lot of tests right now due to the pandemic. So unnecessary testing is just useless.
The thing is, we don't even write positive or negative. We write detected or not detected. We just write that it is not
Exactly.
a
A
detectable
PCR
disease.
Exactly.
positivity does not mean you are COVID, you're harboring
Yeah,
COVID, or you're not
agree.
transmitting the infection. So if we take the, like we all know that culture is the proxy for transmissibility right now. So after 8 or 10 days, a maximum of say 12, 13 days, the virus is hardly cultivable. You can't see it grow,
Yes.
which means it's just the dead virus that you're getting on your PCR.
Yeah. It's usually by the eighth or ninth day you cannot
Exactly.
cultivate them. Yeah.
Yes.
So, Momita, there.
Again, there were situations like in plasma therapy and all. Initially when people had to donate plasma, they were also asking for a negative report.
A
Only if you
negative
have
report.
a negative report you can donate plasma, which I personally did not find any reference to. Why are they asking for that? If you have a particular amount of antibody that you are harboring and you can donate plasma, that's more than enough. Again, positivity is of no use even after 14 days.
So, Momita, there have been a lot of rounds going on about the news that if you are infected with COVID, you are safe for 2, 3 months later on. How true is it? I mean, is it like it seems a kind of some magical myth to me that this will happen, and because every body reacts differently and it's a novel virus, we cannot get stuck at one point. We cannot take it as any other infection that is well studied and well researched. So, what is your take on that 90-day rule? I don't even know where it came from.
I
And
wanted
stop
to
wearing
ask you the
masks.
same thing. I wanted to ask you the same thing. What is this 90-day rule of antibodies? From where it came? I want to know the source. Actually, antibodies are the reaction of our body against the virus. That's it. We don't know whether these antibodies are protective to us yet or not. More and more researches are needed for this to come to a conclusion कि particular this many days you are immune to COVID. It's not like that. Yes, after you get the infection, your body produce antibodies after a certain period of time. Body starts producing, but everybody reacts differently.
Hmm.
Each and everyone reacts differently, and each and everyone, if even if one individual might react differently in different time frame to a same virus. So number one thing, we don't know the neutralizing property or the protective property of the antibody yet, how much it is protective. And secondly, that antibody production is not consistent. It is not yet, we could not find a golden rule what we can follow. Maybe someday we will find, but till now we are not there. Thirdly, what we will do about reinfection? The cases reported are very, very less till now, but there are cases reported. There are cases reported in US, in London, in China, and even in India. In Bangalore, only one case was reported about reinfection. And the if we study, I studied the case reported in London. Okay, so that patient have been found to be positive in April. RT-PCR was positive. That patient have been cured, and he had two RT-PCR negative tests in the course May, June, and July. Again, he turned positive, and they have done a genomic sequence for both the time, and both the time it is found that these two genomic sequences does not match. That means he was a reinfected case. He has been exposed to a new variant of COVID, I mean SARS COVID-19, and he has got the disease second time, and this time he has come with a much more aggravated symptoms, and he was in ventilation for a few days. Luckily, he recovered. But this was the well studied case, and that actually established the possibility of reinfection. And some people, another course of theory, that might be a recurrence or reactivation of the virus also, where in vivo mutation might have happened in this patient. That's why we are getting a different genetic sequence. What I'm trying to say, we don't know. We are not there yet that we can comment on this, or we can follow some golden rule, or I have got COVID so I am immune. No, we are not there yet. So we have to maintain all the social distancing, wearing mask, uh, hand sanitizer and hand washing properly, as we were doing before before an episode of RT-PCR positive or COVID episode. So there is no such rule called 90 days antibody.
Isra, what's your
That's
take on
what
that?
I'm trying to say.
I
Okay,
mean,
yeah. Well, so even
RT
antibodies has become such a household term now. Before COVID, I think a lot of people didn't even know what antibodies were,
Yes.
although we were testing them left, right, and center for other diseases. So yeah, like Momita said, whenever we talk about antibodies, we need to consider both up to what degree they're protective and up to how long they can be protective. So all of us know, we're all talking about antibodies, so we know that, at least 80 to 90% people do mount an immune response. So there is some detectable antibody, but we don't know how many of them actually, the very small proportion of people who generate an adequate response enough to protect them from a virus. And the other thing is, there is a very differential generation of antibodies. So with the research that's coming in, somebody who's an asymptomatic or a mild case might produce a lower level of antibodies than somebody who is severely infected. So it's not that, after you'll have this titer in 2 weeks after COVID. It also depends on your severity. And how long it is, the 90-day rule and all of that, that probably came from the older studies on SARS and MERS, and even the preliminary studies from Corona. People thought that 3 months stuck, I'm immune, nothing can happen to me in the 3-month period. But when you study the antibodies in a little more detail, when you do neutralization assays that we know about, when they do the neutralization assays for coronavirus, they do see that these antibodies are very short-lived. So within 28-day iris, so within 28-day, a lot of clinically recovered cases do show drops in antibody levels. So also this is quite a new research, which is probably more pertinent for us. There is the kits that we are measuring usually measure antibodies to the nucleocapsid, which is not really protective. What is protective is the one that the vaccine is making us generate, which is the anti-receptor binding antibody. So not all antibodies are protective. The common myth that mera antibody hai, I don't need to wear a mask, I can do whatever I want to, I can socialize, should not be the concept at all. And this,
Yes, of course. I have seen cases who have not had any antibody at all. Again, what Isra said, that it all depends
yeah.
on the severity. So yeah.
That also brings us to reinfections that Momita was talking about. So, the case in India, there have been 6 cases in India. First of all, reinfections is quite known. So there is an entire database on reinfections right now, out of which, I think till December 11th, that's last week, there were about 26 proven cases, which is just the tip of the iceberg, because 1,700 plus cases are yet to be confirmed by genomic sequencing. And then there was one case that in India, he was a healthcare worker who developed a reinfection, a proven reinfection within 13 days. So, you can get a reinfection as soon as 2 weeks into the disease. And it's all over the place, from North America to, India and the Africa. Peru reported its case, a case of reinfection last week. So it's basically all over the world.
So that brings
That's
me
what
to
the
the
numbers are quite less till now, but
yeah,
in this pandemic
reported
situation, we
numbers.
cannot trust on numbers.
The reported numbers are very less, but
Reported
the
numbers
ones
are,
that are
yeah,
being tested are about 2,000 already.
yeah.
So, ma'am,
So,
I would like to add,
uh-huh.
this 90-day rule has come up by the study. Actually, they have done one
Yeah.
study on a mass population where they have collected the samples from the COVID affected patients. So, what happened in this study was they started seeing after 90 days, in most of the patients, have started seeing the drop of the antibodies. They've mentioned only this. Nowhere it was mentioned that these antibodies were protective or neutralizing. Nothing was written. They've just written that in most of the cases, after 90 days, we are seeing that the antibody titers are not there. So this 90-day rule has been applied by the clinicians, saying that you are protective till 90 days, but no, that was not proven.
Yeah,
Because
I
the
think it's
main
very
thing is
early to say, we are protected from the
yeah.
virus. Yeah.
So, Isra, can you please tell me, is vaccine a miracle worker? That's the answer to all our solutions. The master we
No,
always wanted for COVID.
yeah. It's a miracle that we've come so far from identifying the virus to having, a lot of vaccines already in the phase 3 trial in less than a year. That I think
Fastest
itself
growing
is
vaccine.
a miracle. Exactly. And the technology that we're using this time, we have the conventional vaccines, we have the adjuvant vaccines, the adenovirus adjuvants, but we also have the mRNA, which is actually a very new concept. And I think we were right in time for to tackle the pandemic. And very encouraging results have come from the trials that are going on with both the famous vaccines, the Pfizer vaccine as well as the Oxford vaccine, showing high levels of protective antibodies, the anti-RBD that I was talking about. So right now there is a lot of promise, and hopefully they should clear the phase 3, phase 4 trials also. The only roadblock here is that the people are actually very scared for some reason, which was not anticipated. People thought, once the vaccine is there, everybody left,
Yeah.
right, and center is going to take the vaccine. But the enrollment for the phase 3 is very, very dismal at the moment, and we need a lot of people to get vaccinated first for the study. And secondly, if we're anticipating a good herd immunity, we need like 3/4 of the world to be vaccinated. So there is some time before, we see the miracle because of a vaccine, but definitely it will be there soon.
Actually,
And
might be there is a misconception that vaccine will be available for everyone. Then why I should victimize myself? But if
Yeah.
we are not having volunteers, we will not have the
Yeah.
vaccine.
Exactly. And with such good efficacy, like with the first dose, you have over 50% efficacy. And with the booster, with the second dose, you have over 90% efficacy for both the vaccines, for most of the vaccines that are being tried. And then there are a lot of very interesting vaccines coming that probably we will discuss some other day with, intranasal vaccines and oral vaccines. So there is a lot being done, but people have to probably just have more faith, probably be more informed about what's going on, how it works. It wouldn't have crossed a certain stage in trial if it was not safe for the general population. So, there are a lot of myths, there's a lot of phobia regarding the vaccine that needs to be taken care of by probably more uh, webinars or way of mouth, whatever.
one question I wanted to ask Geetu specifically, because she had that kind of experience, but she's not in the chat right now. So if anyone could answer this, what is, do we need to wear mask after receiving all the shots? Because people are resisting mask without vaccines also. So with vaccines, they'll be like, they'll take off and maybe, toss it in the
Yeah,
air or
people,
something.
exactly. So people need to also understand that a vaccine is just not, immediate. You need to give it some time to develop an immune response. So when you take a vaccine, your body gets primed to the vaccine, and the second dose in most of the double dose vaccines actually boosts the first dose. So it is not immediate. Most vaccines right now are the double dose vaccines, and you have to give it time. In that time, you are supposed to wear the mask, maintain social distancing, follow all COVID-19 protocols, and in my opinion, even after you're protected and you have good antibodies and you've proven that your antibodies are protected, you still need to wear a mask. I mean, this disease is so new that you don't know what happens. You don't
Cannot
know how
predict.
long the vaccine antibody will give you protection. You don't know if it's 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. You have no idea. And yeah, so, and you don't know if you get reinfection, you don't know how it's going to present the second time. So it's just too early. And I think for at least probably another year or so, people still need to comply with all COVID-19 regulations, because vaccinating 3/4 of the world is not easy. We are a huge population.
Geeta, physicians are telling people, I don't know whether physicians are telling, that's what people say, that physician has told them that now you have got COVID. So now once you have COVID, you have developed antibodies. So you don't need, vaccine. How true is this? Because people are getting away from the vaccine because of this misconception.
I just wanted to highlight the point here. Like if you had your plasma therapy or it is not an indication that you don't need a vaccine, but you are not prioritized like the frontliners. You will be vaccinated at the end, thinking that you will have a little bit of immunity because this is a pandemic. Vaccine production is also on the downside, so we need a bulk of vaccines to vaccinate, so it is prioritized like a frontliners will be vaccinated first, then immunocompromised, then comes the role of the people who have already suffered from covid or who have already taken the plasma therapy. It's not that they don't require vaccine, they have to take all the two shots of the vaccine.
Yeah, like I also mentioned that the antibody half-life that we have from the preliminary studies is very, very short. It's about, it could die out as soon as 28 days. So you don't know when you had COVID and how long they're protective for, if they're protective at all. So even I do agree with Geeta. Even if you had had COVID, if I had COVID, I would definitely take the vaccine again.
I would like to ask Geetu something. Geetu, how easy we should go after we receive the shots?
I'm sorry, Chavi, I couldn't hear
How
you.
easy we should go once we receive the shots? We should be just as precautious, or we should be just as precautious, or we should just lose our guards. What should we do once we receive the vaccine? Should we wear the
After
mask? Should
receiving
we
the
not?
vaccine
Yeah,
first,
yeah.
right? Okay. So, see, the vaccine has come. We are very good. We are very fortunate. We are just into a week, or say maybe the second week of vaccination, if we talk of the entire world per se. So it is not like a switch where the vaccine has entered, you're done with the pandemic, throw away your masks, and then begin party. So I now sincerely, what I would want to
It's a
put it
dream,
across.
actually. Yeah,
Can you hear me?
yeah, we can.
Okay.
Please continue.
So, what I would like to say is that now we are in different stages of vaccination. Somewhere the trials are still going on. Some people have started taking the vaccine. They have been divided into tiers. Say, first, they are going to target the healthcare workers, the elderly. We are going to face several logistic challenges as well, face several population coverage as well. So, as of now, we are still into to look into the effectiveness of our vaccine. Okay, the trials it would have successfully cleared, but when you're dealing with a mass population of vaccine coverage, you're going to face several other challenges. So putting it plain and simple, this is not the time to throw away your masks, enter into the pre-pandemic lifestyle that we had earlier. It is still best to stick on to your masks, to stick on to all the safety precautions that we follow. Wash your hands, maintain your distance, safe distance, and follow all the precautions that you are following until and unless entire vaccine coverage has been made and we see its effectiveness in real picture rather than all the trials and studies which have been conducted.
Right. So, Mamata, please tell me
Yeah.
something. That there is something called a recovery rate, which has been highlighted a lot. I like to see COVID as survival rate because there are sequelae. People have suffered complications. Can you please highlight on that?
Yeah, so most of the COVID positive cases, they get the disease, they get the mild version or maximum moderate version, and they get cured without any sequelae. They are the fortunate people. There is 15 to 20% unfortunate group of people who are actually dealing with the sequelae or the complicated version of COVID, who among them around 5% end up in ventilation. So if we talk about them, they those people who are going through moderate severe disease or even end up in ventilation, they usually come up with a sequelae, which if they are still lucky little bit, that will get cured in 2 or 3 months, but sometimes it continues for years, can continue for years. We are predicting that. So, COVID is, as we most of the people know, कि this is a respiratory disease, not always, that can affect any other organ in your body, and that can lead to other symptoms which usually lingers. So there is a study that COVID survivors have been asked what are the post-COVID complications or post-COVID symptoms they are facing. I will not say complications all are facing. Most of them they are facing a mild kind of symptoms for a longer period of time. Longer means I am trying to tell more than 2 months they are facing. So these milder symptoms I can list as fatigue, continuous malaise and body ache, shortness of breath. Some people are actually complaining of chest and stomach, upper stomach pain without any detectable reason after he is recovered from COVID. And sometimes mental health also gets affected by it. Some people have been found to end up in depression or even sometimes anxiety also. So
I would like to
we
highlight here how much it has been underestimated, the mental health part of it.
yes, yes. So these all things, because there is a drastic change in lifestyle and people's economic conditions, everything. There is a reason, but some people are getting affected very, very badly, mentally as well as physically. So some people are ending up with constrictive heart disease because myocardiums are getting affected, and lung tissue damage is very commonly seen. Restrictive lung disease, lung failure has been reported, and even like basic joint pains and what should I say? It is unexplained joint pain. People have reported. So what I'm and many cases of stroke has been reported
That
post
was my
COVID.
first case that had complication. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So these are like unpredictable. There are mild sequelae also. People are getting it for a long period of time, but there are really serious sequelae we are facing, and we don't know this is the end of the list. It's not even a year we have faced this COVID, and we don't know after 2 years what all sequelae will add up into this list. So that's what secondary infection is one more thing what I like to highlight. COVID survivors are not returning back their usual healthy state
Yes.
for almost 5 to 6 months also. So secondary infections are being very, very common in those group of people. Their immune system is not recovering.
So, we were dealing with the H1N1, we were dealing with Staphylococcus, Streptococcus, all these, bacteria and viruses. And along came this virus suddenly that prioritized itself, made itself some kind of VIP, but highlighted those kind of bacteria and viruses also along with co-infection. This virus thankfully did not even let us forget about other things. So, how indispensable do you think is clinical microbiology in this scenario? What is the future you all see in this now? Because this virus basically stopped everything in this world for a while. So, anyone can answer
See,
this.
the
We will have
pandemic
5 minutes.
it got its name because of a clinical microbiology that is, surviving in the world. So definitely the pandemic has its name because of, how it got diagnosed, and it goes in the hands of the clinical microbiologist. And it is indispensable, the work and everything, the effort that has been put into this. It's just not for COVID-19. It's for every other disease that one is suspecting and confirming and giving it to the other end. So
I
it's
do
it's
agree.
a
I
great
don't
job.
think any of us have had as many calls in the last 1 year as we've had
Yeah.
in all our life combined, I think. And I think we're no more like, younger sisters of pathology. People know who microbiologists are. We're not glorified technicians. We have a role outside the lab also. We are involved in patient care. Forget COVID, even otherwise, we are the ones who
Yeah.
know why a certain infection is not responding the way it should. Everybody can prescribe a drug for any infection with but you know exactly what's going on behind the pathogen. And you are the ones who probably should, we are the ones who should take lead. I think I can speak for Chavi, Yasha, and Geeta at least. We were always encouraged to go to the patient bedside, not be restricted to the laboratory. I think people are seeing that now post the pandemic more than ever before.
Geetu, you want
I
to say
think
something about it?
microbiology.
Yeah, again, I will be quoting Dr. Yasha and Dr. Isra, as they already mentioned. As Dr. Yasha said, I mean, forget about COVID. Otherwise, also clinical microbiology is indispensable. Matlab, without us, you cannot do anything. You cannot reach to a conclusion. You cannot diagnose an infection. You cannot be sure of it. They need us. And COVID was just, an eye opener. COVID, in fact, highlighted our importance. I'm so sorry. A pandemic had to arrive to, glorify
Yeah,
us, but that is the
true.
that is the cruel reality that has happened. Suddenly we got increased importance, the number of jobs increased, the payrolls increased, which we without even asking for it.
Did they
And
though?
we everywhere when we were already ready to do as much as we could do.
Yeah.
It's just that this time it came on demand, on
Yeah.
demand,
And
and we were already ready to do, and we have done it. And so at least I hope, once COVID swipes away again, we do not come back to normal. Matlab, come back to pre-pandemic phase, and we stay on, so that we can definitely help our other medical fraternity to reach to conclusions in their diagnosis, in the prognosis, in the right time, so that we can save on time, we can do much for the patient, we can tell them what is necessary, what antibiotics they have to change, how they have to escalate, de-escalate. All that is going to come from us. They really
yes.
need us.
I would just like to add, as microbiologists are coming out of lab and going to the clinical rounds, please clinicians can also come out of hospital and wards and come to the lab and see what happens here. There are lots to learn there. Please don't
Exactly.
ignore that part. That will add up in your clinical knowledge for sure.
I always
I,
say that report signatures are just the trailer, they're not the climax. This is just the tip of the iceberg.
And I
If
would
we write
encourage
it,
my contemporaries and the juniors who would take up microbiology to actually move out. Okay, being behind the lens is a very big part of our job, but there is a whole world to explore, and to, you're a part of the management team as a clinical microbiologist. You're not only a diagnostician. So I would encourage even my juniors to become more, not be just behind the lens, go into the wards, talk to people, talk to infectious ID specialists. I think we were encouraged by our faculty to do the same. And we were a very lucky bunch, because I remember in our critical care laboratory, we would have intensivists coming, we would have medicine people coming and discussing cases. So we were definitely a fortunate bunch. And I hope everybody, moves out of their comfort zone. We're not here to just perform tests. We're here to even manage patients along with the physician.
I totally agree with Isra. I always feel that with the basic MBBS that we have, we can just practice as a GP anytime. And with the added knowledge of what we have specialized in, I mean, this is what, it's like a feather on your cap. You can diagnose, you can treat, you have the right knowledge of antibiotics, you have the right dosage thing that PKPD, anything, be it anything, it. You can diagnose infections, the actual signs and symptoms and everything. And now you can, treat the patient also with the knowledge of your antibiotics, antivirals, and of course, your basic MBBS. So I
And
don't
on a
think so
positive
we
note,
lack at any point.
yeah. One more, just on a very positive conclusion, I would say we do not need to prove ourselves by talking anymore. I think microbiology has crossed that
Yeah.
stage, and we can let our work speak for itself now.
I think we can say what we have envisioned at the beginning of our PG MD microbiology. We have arrived there very, very fast. Now we
Exactly.
will just go ahead.
We're the newest fleet of doctors in India, at least. We're like, microbiology is the most recent field, and we're already, we've already made strides into the field, and we have to keep going. We just can't stop just because the pandemic will end or whatever. We have a lot to work on.
Yeah.
Every microbiologist are enjoying their job. They're enjoying the way they are they are contributing to the society right now, and the way
Mamita,
they
all
are
six
being
of us,
honored.
I can speak for six of us, we've already enjoyed our jobs. We have become a
Yeah, we
bunch of
have.
workaholics by default.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah.
And from here, I would conclude this session. To all my viewers, if you have watched till now, thank you so much for your attention. Thank you for being there. You can ask us any questions, just put it on the comment box. If you like this video, please share it with other people. You don't know whom it might benefit. Also, thank you to my army, my supporters, and proud microbiologists, and I'm their proud colleague. Thank you so much for being here.